South Sudan has been in the spotlight for the past few months, with a lot of political changes and speculation on what might happen due to these changes. The young nation may be facing another civil war. But first, let's look back into South Sudan politics and what may be happening here. In an article published on 5 August 2005, this is what Al Jazeera had to say about the death of former Vice President of Sudan John Garang. Uganda's president has said the helicopter crash that killed Sudanese first Vice President John Garang may not have been an accident. Some people say accident. It may be an accident, it may be something else, President Yoweri Museveni said on Friday, becoming the first official of any government to publicly suggest the 31st of July crash may have been the result of foul play. The helicopter was very well equipped. This was my helicopter, the one I am flying all the time. I'm not ruling anything out, he said, noting that an international panel of experts had been appointed to look into the crash. Either the pilot panicked, either there was some side wind or the instruments failed, or there was an external factor, Museveni told southern Sudanese mourners in the town of Yai, where Garang's body was brought ahead of his Saturday funeral in Juba. The article went on to mention Museveni did not elaborate on what he meant by an external factor, but there has been widespread speculation in southern Sudan that the aircraft might have been somehow sabotaged or shot down. A journalist based in Uganda told Al Jazeera that the Ugandan newspapers had speculated that Garang was not the target of the helicopter crash, but that the actual target had been the Ugandan's President Yoweri Museveni. Commenting on President Museveni's remarks, Idris Al-Qadi said the Ugandan press had implied that some Rwandan parties might have been behind the crash and that it was meant for Museveni and not John Garang, however. Until Friday, officials in Khartoum and Kampala, members of the SPLM, a leadership and Garang's widow, Rebecca, had all dismissed such possibilities and maintained that the crash was accidental. With that in mind, let's come back to issues at hand in South Sudan right now. A lot of speculations have been going on about what Ugandan's troops may be doing in South Sudan this month of April 2025. While Ugandans acknowledge why they are in South Sudan, the Sudanese government denies all this. The relationship between Salva Kiir and Yoweri Museveni started a while back from 2005. A lot of action and questions might lead to thinking the two guys may have started cooking plans way back. All this might raise the question, did Salva Kiir and Yoweri Museveni have a hand in the helicopter crash of John Garang? Right now, a lot of things are clear to the extent of how much power Yoweri Museveni holds in South Sudan. Yoweri Museveni has had his hooks into the Sudanese government for quite some time now. Let's see how deep this goes. Ugandan President Museveni has been very active in the South Sudan conflict since it erupted in mid-December. But many Ugandans would prefer their country to remain more detached. During a late December press conference, Museveni issued a stern warning to rebel leader Riek Machar, South Sudan's former vice president. He is so involved to the extent he sends out warnings. And sending troops to help out, this all ends with debts and all bills going into the wrong pockets. After all, we all know nothing is for free. With Museveni looting South Sudanese resources, it's clear why John Garang had to go and why a well-educated person would be a threat to his hands on the cookie jar. South Sudan has become more of a playground for a lot of countries that can actually benefit from this conflict, with countries like Kenya, Ethiopia, Uganda, and the US and more. Even though others really want to benefit, there is no other country with so much involvement like Uganda. On December 2013, Museveni also sent troops to South Sudan, which the Ugandan military claims are merely guarding the airport and government buildings. But Uganda's involvement in the conflict has been controversial on both sides of the border, including among Ugandan lawmakers themselves. The rhetoric itself denies Uganda the chance of playing a neutral role, said Wilfred Niwigaba, one of 8 Ugandan MPs who held a news conference in late December rebuking the president for taking sides in the conflict and for plunging the country into war without the approval of parliament. We lose what we would have otherwise gained as a neutral arbiter, so we cannot participate as an arbiter in the Sudan. And regardless of how finally the war ends, our leadership will still be viewed as a partisan and biased partner, he added. So the benefits of us remaining neutral would have definitely outweighed the advantages, if any, that are being obtained now. Mugabe said that, among other things, the government has not fully explained the rationale for getting involved in South Sudan. We do not know the cost of that war, both materially on the taxpayer of Uganda and, too, the human cost, Mugabe noted. Our country now seems to be involved in so many wars. We are in Somalia, now the Sudan, the Central African Republic, but government has never come up to give us accountability. Who spends on these troops, and is it worth the cost? Uganda was a strong supporter of the SPLA during South Sudan's independence war. Paul Omek, an expert on security studies at Kampala's Makerere University, said that as a result, Museveni enjoys considerable influence with his northern neighbor, particularly with South Sudan President Salva Kiir's government. They talk at a personal level. Those people come to him to consult. Omek said that's what he wants, like a father figure, like a big brother. He talks to them, and they listen to him. Museveni could be afraid of losing this influence were Machar to take power, Omek said, adding that such overt partisanship is risky because it is not clear who will ultimately take control of the country. Now, with all of that said, we can clearly see how far Museveni can go to keep his influence in South Sudan with the 2005 helicopter crash that killed John Garang. Both Museveni and Salva Kiir benefit significantly, with Salva Kiir being a puppet to Museveni tunes. How could we expect anything different in 2025 upcoming conflict? With South Sudan skipping election years a few times, one cannot help but wonder. Yoweri Museveni has been the president of Uganda for decades. That is something to look at when we look at South Sudan politics. This is a man who doesn't want to lose his influence in South Sudan elections, can't really be helpful if the wrong person wins. Right now, we can see how South Sudan wants to shift power to Bomel without actual elections. This shift can help with strengthening the power of both Museveni and Salva Kiir with no repercussions. During the 2013 civil war, a lot of parties benefited in the atrocities they committed. They can't be held accountable while still holding so much power. On Al Jazeera's article, these crimes warrant punishment by the ICC. More than 40 South Sudanese officials may have committed crimes against humanity. The United Nations has said. A report on Friday by investigators from the UN Commission on Human Rights in South Sudan said the officials, including military generals and state governors, may be responsible for the rape and murder of civilians and recruitment of child soldiers. The officials were not named in the report. Children have been recruited by all sides in the conflict and forced to kill civilians. In many cases, they have watched loved ones raped or killed. The report said the scale of the hunger and destruction inflicted on the country by its political and military leaders defies description. This seems to be what could be expected to happen again if world leaders can actually stop filling their pockets and actually doing something to help out this young nation. With a lot of countries benefiting from the previous civil war, this one is no different unless South Sudan wise up and does something new for change. That can actually be achieved, although with sharks like Yoweri Museveni smelling blood in the water. One can't help it but pray this young nation comes out on the other side. Let's get back to the changes made by the South Sudan government. Sucking government officials, the most bold and strictly surprising is the house arrest and removal of Riek Machar, which may actually be the cause of this conflict once more. For more updates on the South Sudan situation, please like, comment, and subscribe.